Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton with you right here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. So in today's show, we're going to be discussing one of our favorite topics, which is the manufacturing industry. Love manufacturing. And today's conversation is going to be really focused on Africa, in particular, the market of Kenya. So get ready. Stay tuned for an intriguing and informative conversation where you're going to learn quite a bit. Hey, quick programming note. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to venture over to wherever you get your podcast from, Supply Chain Now, and subscribe so you don't miss conversations just like this. Would love to earn your podcast review. Let us know how we're doing. That'll also help us get the word out and reach more people, which is a good thing. Okay, I want to welcome in two wonderful guests here today. I'll tell you, we got a great conversation teed up. We've been enjoying the pre-show conversation, learn some new things about some repeat guests here. So we'll talk more about that, but I want to welcome in our guest today, Musa Kuniha, Chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers and Group CEO of CKL Africa, which I'm sure you've heard of. The rest of us have. We're talking about pets and animals and needs pre-show. We'll learn more about that. And old friend, repeat guest, Deborah Dole, Principal Manufacturing Product Management at GE Digital, and really exciting, founder, Circular Supply Chain Network. I'll talk about chasing your passions. So stay tuned as we learn more about that. So Mushai, Deborah, good morning. How you doing?
Tremendous. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Yeah, it's good afternoon from Kenya, but doing well. Yeah, the day's all gone.
Great to have you both. And Deborah, gosh, it's been forever since we were in Atlanta on whatever episode number that is. The world's changed dramatically, but hey, in good ways and challenging ways, but it's great to have you back. And thanks so much for bringing Mushai to the conversation today. I tell you, just doing my homework on you, Mushai. You're a global business star, and it's great to dive into your perspective here today.
I don't know about that. I'm a Kenyan-based businessman, so at least a couple of people know me in Nairobi. Sometimes I go into a restaurant and they think, looks familiar, but we don't know who he is. So not that much of a star.
That might be a good way to be, though. That might be a good way to be.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So Deborah and Mushai, I want to start, before we get into business and talk about some of the interesting things taking place right now, I want to get to know you a little bit better. So Mushai, since this is your first time with us, I want to start with you. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and give us the goods on your upbringing a little bit.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on the show. This is going to be interesting, I think, even from the pre-show conversation. So I'm Kenyan born in a smallish town, about 150 kilometers from Nairobi, called Nakuru, but grew up most of my life in Nairobi. So I'm more or less a city boy, so to speak. Went to school here, just went to university in the UK, in Wales, for 3 long wet years. It rains a lot in Wales. So, but it was a good time. And I studied law. That's what I started on. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I left high school. And one of my dad's friends thought that, you could do law. It opens doors for you. And he was right, because I did do the law. I practiced. I came back to Kenya, qualified to be a lawyer, but really didn't enjoy it. So went straight into the family business. And I've been doing business ever since. I was back in 1998. Yeah.
Well, there's so much more to that story. I appreciate you kind of giving it at a high level, but I got one follow-up question. So growing up, you said primarily you were a city boy, as you put it, in Nairobi, and then spent time, of course, in Wales. Let's talk food for a second. What was a key food dish that was part of your upbringing that you still can't get enough of?
It's easy. It's chapati. Have you heard of chapati?
I have not.
You've not heard about chapati. Maybe Deborah has. So chapati is it's a wheat based. It's like a cake. It's almost like naan, cooked on a pan. and it's Indian. I think originally it's from India, but it came. We had a huge Indian influx at the beginning of the previous century, and it became part of our national food. So chapatis are still a challenge for me, and as probably, Scott, you may know, at a certain age, not everything that is nice to eat is good for you.
Right.
So I'm now on a restricted number of chapatis a week.
I'm with you. I am with you.
Just to live longer.
Aspect of the journey.
Yes.
All right. So thanks for sharing. I'm going to have to check out chapati for sure. All right. So Deborah, same question. Again, great to have a repeat guest. We've been, of course, tracking all the big things you've been up to in the 18 months, 2 years or so it's been. So tell us, where did you grow up? Refresh our memory a bit and give us, a couple anecdotes from your upbringing.
Sure. Thanks, Scott, for having us. And huge thanks for Mushai for joining us. I'm really excited that we could do this together. I grew up in a fairly small rural area in the geographic center of Washington State, up in the upper left-hand corner of the states. And both my parents had grown up on farms. And so we were kind of like in the biggest small town around. I remember when we got a escalator in high school, one story in the department store that was the Bon Marché at the time. It's a now no longer existing department store, Mushai. And anyhow, we actually went and rode that for fun. So that just gives you an idea of the entertainment levels. But very similar to Mushai, I actually have been a city girl at heart always. And how that happened growing up in a small place, I'm not entirely sure. But one element that's been tough this last year is not being in cities because they're not very fun in the middle of a global pandemic. And I really miss the energy that comes with being around so many people. And so that's a common theme between the two of us. And also similarly, I didn't know what I wanted to do after school. Being in a smaller town, our guidance counselors, they asked, what do you want to do? Well, I want to travel. And they were like, well, how about being a stewardess?
Oh, gosh.
Not even flight attendant. This is early 2000s, Yes. And I thought, gosh, there's got to be something else out there. And so I also chose business because I figured everybody buys things. And so that would be a ticket out of the country for me. So a lot of parallels between us, I think, Mushai.
Yeah, sounds like it for sure. And travel you have done. I mean, a lot of the aspect of your journey has been global in nature. We'll touch on more of that. And Mushai, when I first sat down with Deborah, I gathered that when she mentioned she'd be on holiday in the next month or so, and I had to pause in true American form. Wait a second, holiday? What is that? And now vacation. I got you. So I learned a lot from Deborah in that first interview and ever since. One more follow-up question for you, Deborah. You mentioned pre-show that you're learning something new musically. Please share. Yes.
So these last couple of months, my husband and I have been in Hawaii. We kind of looked around and said, where is warm to spend winter that is also safe in this pandemic we're in? And so we've picked the big island of Hawaii, extremely safe. Everybody gets tested on the way in. And so in being here, I asked for an ukulele for Christmas, and I have been learning. I'm good enough that we can have a really fun time. The way that the ook is tuned helps you sound really good, even without only having to know a few chords. And so the hardest part has been learning to do different strums. But it's been a whole lot of fun to have a hammock strung up and have a little slice of island life in between all the normal jobs, work, and everything else that goes along with being an adult.
I love it. I bet some of those days you can take it out on that ukulele after a long day of work, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, well, thank you so much for indulging us. I appreciate the opportunity for us and our community and the audience to get to know you both a little bit better on a human level. It's important. All right. So now let's talk about your professional journey. I think this aspect is important, especially as we kind of look to identify the context or the lens of how you view the global business world. So Mushab, starting back with you, tell us, you've done a ton, both of y'all done a ton in your business journeys, but if you would pick a couple of key roles that really impacted your worldview.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Like I said, I started off as a lawyer, a student lawyer. And as I was doing my apprenticeship, I kind of decided this is not really going to work for me. I think I remember the conversation around that was with another student lawyer as well. He said one of the problems with this being a lawyer is that you sit there in the office and people bring you their problems and then you try and solve them. So the extent of your creativity is limited to the depth of their problem or the challenge that they're facing. And sometimes it's, they just want a mortgage or a contract or something. So I thought I wanted to be a bit more creative. So I said, when you're outside, you can be a bit more creative. I can start a new business, I can do something new, and it's all new. So my family was into business. My dad was in business as well. So what I first did was to help my mom in business. And I've actually been in the family business ever since. So it's partly family business that I've been engaged in. Started off with selling detergents, which was a business my dad was in, industrial detergents, went into cleaning services. That was pretty tough. That was my first executive role. So I was like, you're going to run this business for us, which was quite a challenge. I was still very young, but good lessons, dealing with people. At that time, I had at the peak, I think I had 400 staff or something. So
wow.
That was quite challenging then.
Yeah, especially for your first kind of CEO role, it sounds like.
Yes.
So what's if I can ask
actually,
you,
most of them are cleaners, so it's not too difficult.
What's if I could interject for a second, we've all had that first big role, right? And it teaches us some really good things and inspiring things, and makes us want to work around the clock. And then it can teach us some really challenging things, kind of the punch to the gut. What was a early lesson learned from that early leadership role?
Yeah, I think the one I remember is broad responsibility. So as a CEO, you need to know, you've got to have a big picture of what's going on. Everything's going on. So the one that I remember that hit me hardest was some of our taxes, actually. So we kind of got to audit later on, and then the auditor says, well, you're kind of behind on these taxes. And I look at the accountant and I'm like, why? And he said, oh, well, I thought I should pay this first and I should do this first. And I'm like, it's taxes, man. You pay the taxes first. So that took me a while to sort out and to figure out that there are some important questions you must ask, even because you're delegating work to others, but there are some important questions that you need to know. What are those questions that you need to ask whoever you've delegated to? Yeah.
Excellent point. I
so
think
that was one. Yeah. But so anyway, yeah. From cleaning was the beginning, and then I joined the main family business. Unfortunately, my dad passed away in 1998, so I went into his main business, which was then it was then called Cooper Kenya. It's now CKL Africa, and this was at that time it was an animal health input business. So he had inherited the region, kind of bought the company that distributed products for Cooper's Animal Health. It's now Merck. It's now part of Merck and MSD Animal Health. So they're still our principals, and we sell their products here. We manufacture and sell their products for the regional market here in Kenya. And that's where I've been now for 20-something years, 20 odd years. We've grown in the range of products that we sell beyond the MSD range. A lot of focus on nutrition and productivity, because the goal has been to try and help farmers produce more. And then we had a bit of real estate. So this business that my dad had got into had some real estate on it, which was in the past a farm. So out of that, I didn't mention that when I said I didn't know what I wanted to do, one of my options was to be an architect.
Okay.
I was like, maybe I should be an architect. Maybe I should draw buildings and stuff. I liked art. So anyway, in the end, we started a development business, built a couple of houses, ended up building a hotel, which we were running. Unfortunately, the hotel is now closed. It didn't survive COVID. And we still got a real estate business that we're running alongside what we're doing. And then a few bits and bobs. Family business is always investing in this and that.
Yes, multifaceted is what I'm hearing. Well, so we'll circle back because we're going to ask you more about some of the things you're doing currently. But Deborah, coming back to you, same question. If you could walk us through a couple of those key roles earlier in your journey that helped shape how you view the world and kind of how your lens evolved, how you look at challenges and successes, and you name it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Very similar. Again, early in my career, I was thrown into a leadership role to launch Surface V1. And I kind of looked up, maybe 24, 25 years old, and all of a sudden had 3 full-time teams reporting to me. And I did kind of a crummy job with a lot of them. I didn't really understand the right way to inspire people. Everyone was really stressed out. There was a lot of deadlines. And so I learned a large spectrum of situational leadership, we'll call it. In these situations, this seems to work really well. And in these situations, I seem to be demotivating instead of motivating the team. And really through those couple of really tough months, long hours in the office, a lot of executive pressure, I reflect on that time a lot and think about the type of leader I want to be and how I want to show up for the team. I think a lot about the types of questions to ask, to Mushai's point, and often find that by asking the right questions, teams end up feeling more empowered and able to manage themselves a lot better. And so early on, had that experience, certainly had ups and downs through my leadership development in the past decade or so. But that was a big role for me. And the positive piece of that was having a leader who set out a big challenge for me and expected me to fill the shoes. And that type of high expectation, high performance was really very impactful early in my career. And so finding those types of leaders who, it doesn't matter if you're new out of school, it doesn't matter if you're not a traditional fit for the role, but to spot talent and really give them a chance to excel was also very impactful to me.
Well, I can only imagine, and especially innovative product, in the first version of it, by the way. So, but I completely agree with you. I think those lessons we learned in those early roles, motivation, inspiration, and just the technical side of how to lead, right? And for you to have that, especially that role at 24, 25 years old, man, what a wonderful, warts and all, as someone said, what a wonderful opportunity that clearly impacted you as a leader. So I love that. I appreciate you sharing. Let's move forward a little bit because I want to talk about what y'all are both up to now. There's so much. We could have a 6-hour show really on all the different things you're involved in. And Deborah, for now, I want to stick with you because then I want to circle back to Mushai. So the Circular Supply Chain Network, which you founded, which there has been a ton of buzz across social and even in human conversations we're having, right? You're becoming a mythical personality around circularity, which is a wonderful thing because it needs a voice, right? It needs conversation. So tell us the inspiration behind founding it and then what it is.
And I'm really excited because Mushai is really a thought leader in Kenya and through East Africa and across the continent globally. We've been on panels together around what does circularity mean, especially in resource-constrained environments, which has been something that's been quite refreshing as we're exploring this. So how this all worked, I kind of tripped and fell into circular economy 3-4 years ago. I found the concept, got my head around it and thought, gosh, this seems really big for supply chain, but didn't see a lot of other voices talking about circularity in supply chain. And so I started talking about it. And actually the first time I gave a keynote was at the SAPIX conference with our friend Jenny Froome and in Cape Town. And thankfully they invited me back and I can share, as thoughts progress and I get to present there every year, which is great. There was this interesting week this last September where, about a dozen strangers reached out on LinkedIn and we're like, hey, is there a place that supply chain professionals get together to talk about this? And I was like, nope. And they were like, can you start one? Absolutely not. I don't have time for this. But it was a kind of a magical week where just so many people had recommended it. And so I put a Zoom link out in the world, and 9 people showed up. And then the next month, 30 people showed up. And then the next month, more people showed up. And all of a sudden we needed breakout rooms, and realized that there was a real interest and curiosity about what circularity means for a field. At the same time, a recognition that supply chain has such a big impact out in the world. And if we make better decisions, we can literally save the planet. So started this. Self-selecting volunteers have come and found me. We've got volunteers on every continent, not Antarctica.
Not yet.
And we've got folks who call in from every continent when we have these events. We've got a couple different time zones. And so it's been really wonderful, actually, to be able to have so many people joining from so many countries and so many time zones across so many parts of their careers, and all wanting to contribute to, changing the way that our field works. So we're a volunteer-led nonprofit, and we do the best we can and move exactly as fast as we can. But it's been a really cool experience these last 6 months or so.
Love it, and I look forward to just facilitating and driving dialogue. As simple maybe as that sounds to many people listening to this, it's so important. Whether it's industry or whether it's societal or whatever. So I love the leadership role you and your organization are playing there, and look forward to big things to come. So we'll have to bring you back on and get our finger on the pulse of what the Circular Supply Chain Network is up to. All right, so Misha, I want to talk about the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, but before we leave this topic of circularity, clearly you're a well-respected leader in this space. A couple thoughts there, and then we'll move into manufacturing.
Yeah. So I think when we think about circularity, and like Deborah mentioned earlier, this resource-constrained environment. So for me, even when I started working in the family business, and as I've worked here and grown into it, you actually see the challenges of Africa in manufacturing and just our general economies. We are still, we're probably the poorest continent still in many large measures, financially and so on, economically. So it's always been a challenge for me is how are we building? What's the contribution? What are we building in our environment, and what are we growing? And to some extent, it's an issue of stewardship. I kind of come from a Christian background, and we had this whole thing about we've got to be stewards of the earth that we have. So are we making the most of what we have and what we're doing? So it's about growing jobs and systems and that kind of thing. But obviously, also in stewardship does involve taking care of things beyond what we're using. And I got into this, I kind of fell into this accidentally because at the Association of Manufacturers, we had, this was in 2017, or was that 18? When we had the first plastics bags ban in Kenya. And I was heading the legal and regulatory committee at the association. So we were trying to negotiate with government around this ban and these issues. Because as they drafted it, actually, technically, they basically banned all plastic packaging. That's what the law was drafted as. So manufacturers were like, how are we going to get soap out? How are we going to get anything out if we can't package it and so on? But we did manage to negotiate and engage with government and realize that the big issue was the shopping bags. And so that was sorted out. But we realized this is going to be a continuing story, because the next thing was water bottles, the PET bottles and so on. And we had other manufacturers dealing with the same issue. So we started looking around and saying, what are the options? What are other people doing? This is not the first time it's being done in the world. Some of our members are multinational, so they also had contacts with people all over the world. And that got us engaged into thinking about the big picture. You might have a small issue with plastic here, but you've got a bigger issue around the environment and so on. At the Association of Manufacturers, we also host the global network. And that's part of the UN. It started under the UN, under their Sustainable Development Goals. They decided that they want the private sector to also participate in this. And so they formed this group called the Global Network, and we kind of host it and run it within the Association of Manufacturers and try and get companies to subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so there you're back to sustainability, and circularity, I guess, just comes out of this thing. It's how we're going to get this sustainability done well. And in Africa, like I say, it's always a challenge because, and it was even in the Paris climate change discussions and so on, the challenge that China and India always bring to the table, which in a sense speaks for the third world, is that we also want to get better lives. We want to electrify the countryside. People want to drive cars. People want to live a certain lifestyle. And to get there means we are going to have to do, our carbon footprint is going to grow, basically, is what they're saying. So that's always been a challenge. But then we are starting to think about, okay, what are the alternatives? How can we do this better? Because sometimes we can skip some of the phases that other countries went through. But we still do need to develop. The development challenge and the demand for development here is very high. We have a very young population. People are going to need to live and eat and get better lifestyles.
Yeah. At the same time, that as much as a challenge that might be the population growth, it's also a wonderful advantage, and the ideas and innovation and leadership, and it's all a tremendous upside for business opportunities that are already coming into across Africa and what will be growing. We've had a couple of different interviews that folks were informing us and teaching us about the startup environment across Africa, which is really cool. All right. So there's so much, lots of opportunity there. So much to talk about, so little time. Mushai and Deborah, one last thing. I love how y'all both kind of speak to the practicality of circularity, right? Because I think that for non-technologists and maybe non-engineers and maybe even non-practitioners, I think they've got to be able to understand it and understand the steps in the path of the plastics. Mushai was a great example. And I think that'll help us all make more traction and move the needle sooner and earlier and with bigger movements maybe. So I appreciate y'all's leadership here. Okay. Mushai, you mentioned the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Elaborate a little bit more about what that organization does.
Yeah, so we are about 62 years old as an organization here, and we bring together manufacturers. It's a voluntary organization, and we've got 14 different sectors of manufacturing that are covered. And these are people in Kenya. You've got everything from steel to leather to pharmaceuticals to agro-processing. And we kind of bring them together and we try and represent their issues to government, to regulators, tax-related issues, and of course, even developmental issues like this, about how are we also going to grow the manufacturing industry. In fact, our tagline is inspiring global competitiveness because, Africa has always had this potential for growing its industrial base. And historically, what we've seen in other continents everywhere, the kind of economic growth comes up when you have a big industrial base because it can create jobs, value adding. Because at the end of the day, what manufacturing does is creating value by value adding to different materials, etc. So that's what we want to do. And we're trying to advocate that from government perspective, but also from our members. So we do have an aspect of trying to train and develop our members to be better manufacturers, to be more competitive manufacturers. We do a bit of work trying to open markets. So we've been busy with the East African community. We have some kind of market around here. But now the new kid on the block, also the new project, is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Right.
And actually earlier on, we were just on a call talking about how we're going to make this a reality. At the moment, it's a proposal, it's an idea, it's got political buy-in, but there's a lot, like you mentioned, there's a lot of technical work that needs to go in to make it happen. And we are hoping that's going to open up a little bit of more of the markets in here. We've got about 1,500 members spread across Kenya, all sizes, from the largest corporates, the largest manufacturers, and we have a specific project as well to small and micro manufacturers, people just starting out, where we can also kind of educate them and give them input and help. Because we say even the largest manufacturer started out as a small manufacturer one day. Might have been 200 years ago, but at some point they were just a small manufacturer doing a small thing.
Agreed.
And so we think there we can build our future giants and champions. Yeah, out of that.
I love that. I love that. Speaking of which, the Clorox company, we dove into their history a few weeks back, and I'm not going to get the names. I can't remember all the names, but one of the biggest turning points in that, and now that global behemoth, was there was a husband and wife team that essentially kind of came in the 1800s and changed operations and also had a big impact on strategy. And the husband kind of focused on operations, and the wife really dove into changing how they sold the product. So the Clorox company was selling to the industrial space initially, but I can't remember this individual's name. She said, "Hey, let's sell to homes, and there's going to be lots of personal uses for this bleach product." That changed the course of history for the Clorox company, and it's really just it's to your point, Mushai. It's those early eureka moments, right, where we force ourselves not to do what we've been doing for a couple of years, but change pace, and it opens up these huge doors. So I love what you're doing. I love the conversations. I mean, y'all got a lot of kindred spirits between the two of you. Facilitating these conversations that can benefit so many, whether you're part of a big company or you're part of a small company, or you're an entrepreneur or you're a practitioner. It's really important. So I want to bring you back into the conversation. I want to kind of talk about a couple of observations kind of across Africa. And Mushai, you mentioned some of the free trade and some of the economic initiatives that are taking place that I think can really unite countries across the continent, wonderful opportunities. So we look forward to seeing more progress there. But Deborah, you spent time and worked across Africa. When you think of manufacturing and some of those things that Mushai touched on, what comes to your mind?
Super, thanks. A global trend, which I'm hoping will stick, as we're talking about the small manufacturers, we're going to swing back, folks. Like, we've spent the last 150, 200 years trying to figure out how to industrialize and make massive manufacturing centers, and it's not going to last. We are shipping items way too far distance-wise. Most food in America goes 2,000 miles per ingredient. Your jeans probably went 40,000 miles. Your iPhone has been around the moon and back before you even got to turn it on. This is kind of getting out of hand, and it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, like Mushai said, if a country can establish itself as a manufacturing powerhouse, it's a tremendous way to unlock growth. And in fact, that has been the history for this last 50 years or so in the global stage. However, at the other side, if we can properly decentralize or hold on to these smaller manufacturing hubs and make only what's needed with regionally harvested materials, we unlock such economic power and less dependency on trading partners. Now, I am all for global trade, of course. However, as materials continue to pass borders, we continue to open ourselves to disruption, like we have seen in this last year. So I think this idea of these smaller manufacturers will be holding more weight as we go into the future. They're still going to be highly digitized, highly technical. So there's certainly some development work to do around the world there. But if we look at, Unilever's Nano Factory, they just put out an entire food production line in a 40-foot container. Not to be outdone, Microsoft has put an entire server farm in a 40-foot container. Much of the inspiration was to be able to provide server services in resource-constrained environments. So it's a completely self-contained container that can be placed down anywhere in the world. And I think this is going to be really exciting and a great use of entrepreneurship that exists across Africa, especially in Kenya. I don't know, Mushai, if this is real, but when I was there, I was told it's like the Silicon Savannah, the digital startup mentality in Nairobi I mean, I've been to a couple of incubators, and what's happening there is just tremendous. We see wonderful inspiration. For example, mobile money started first in Kenya. We don't even have it here. And the ability to pay for anything with just texting, we can do it now with the iPhone, and you touch it to something and it works. But the idea of mobile money has been around for so long, and we don't even have that yet. Cash on delivery, we don't do that. And wouldn't that be cool? So anyhow, there's a lot that we can share with each other. And I think with organizations like what Mushai runs, connected to other similar organizations around the world, we can learn a lot and swap a lot. And I think as we need to go sort of, I don't want to say back to a decentralized way, because we never had robotic, automated 5G factories before. But as we move towards this together, we're going to see a different pace of growth. And I don't think the disparity among the different regions around the world has to be as large as it has been.
All right. That's a lot of goodness you just shared there, Deborah. Musha, I want to come back to you here. Based on anything she just shared, what would you like to pick up on? And of course, would love to hear your observations on the local manufacturing market as well.
Yeah, I think that will, the shorter supply chains is definitely one of the issues. Well, and I think the whole conversation about the environment and what we need to do going forward, the big stories, is quite complicated. So, and we always need to think about the trade-offs and be honest about that. There will be some trade-offs. Plus, but that doesn't mean that there are no solutions. It's just that there are trade-offs. So you have to balance these things out. So, one of Africa's historical complaints is that we issue a lot of raw materials. We grow a lot of things and then we ship them out, and then they are processed somewhere else, which again is not necessary. Because you'd be surprised. Do you know, Scott, which country is the largest exporter of coffee in the world?
Which country?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to guess.
You want to guess? It's actually Germany.
Is it really?
It's Germany, yeah.
Man, I'm blown away. I thought the trick answer was going to be from the African continent, but then you hit me with Germany.
No, it's Germany, because all the world's coffee, again, like to Deborah's point, all the world's coffee, well, not all, a lot of the world's coffee goes to Germany. It's kind of blended and mixed up, and then it's exported from there. So you think, is that really necessary? Perhaps this should be happening in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia. They also grow a lot of coffee there. Maybe that's where some of these things should be happening. Of course, the other side of it is that the consumers, and that economically is the challenge, that a lot of the growth models that we have is that they are in the global north, a lot of rich consumers who have money to spend. So everybody down here is thinking of what can I make for them that they're going to send me money for. So that's what the idea is. So that means things start traveling across. But there is an opportunity. And like for us in Africa, my business is in agriculture. One of them is like, if we got food sufficient, a lot of Africa, we are still not food sufficient. We still import quite a bit of food. So if we got food sufficient, that's creating jobs, value here in our markets, etc. We have a lot of raw materials. So you mentioned the iPhone, and the big stories like in the Congo with coltan and all these other rare minerals, which are picked up in not very large amounts, shipped across the world everywhere to make the phones. Should we be doing some of that production in these markets? So that's kind of where we start seeing for our manufacturing. The huge opportunity in manufacturing is looking at just the resources that you have internally. What can you do with them and turn them into something beneficial? And there are opportunities there if we start looking at them that way. So traditionally, unfortunately, sometimes people do start thinking about industries that helped other countries grow, whether it was in metal, it was in vehicles and those kind of things. But, the future is changing. We need to look at what are the resources that you have near you, and you may be able to serve the world with them. But you can also serve your local markets with them and try and engage with them that way, just to try and get them going. Again, there was also the circularity issue, because there is a lot of waste. And we do have, although the West came up with a linear economy, and it very deep roots and pretty expansive. We don't have to go that way. I like what Deborah said about mobile money. About I think 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Kenya basically had 50% of the world's mobile money users, because M-Pesa, which we use here, was so successful. I think the rest of the world has got onto the story, so now we are no longer as big. But it's huge. I mean, it's huge, and it works. It works very well in our market here. So we can create new systems. That doesn't mean that we have to follow the same line that everybody else went, the rest of the world went through. And the key thing there being how we can conserve resources. Because again, we're in a resource scarce environment. This morning or earlier on, I was talking to our steel, the chair of our steel sector, and the price of steel is just going through the roof at the moment because of Australia having a fight with China making demands and no export things. I mean, it's global things happening everywhere. So we've got metals around here. We can reuse them. And if we can find ways of recycling them, we don't have a lot of iron ore, but we still have quite a lot of metal that we can recycle and reuse and find other materials.